The region of the Pontic-Caspian Steppe has been home to many horse-riding nomadic pastoralist steppe tribes throughout history. One of these tribes is known to history as the Alani, also referred to as the Alans. In this video, we will be examining the remarkable plight of these nomads from their Indo-European origins, their expulsion from the Caspian Steppe, their migration into Western Europe, and how their established kingdom in the Caucasus Mountains lasted until the very end of the medieval era. At the beginning of the 4th century BC, many Iranic Sarmatian pastoralist horse nomads began making their appearance in the Pontic-Caspian Steppe as part of an offshoot of the wider Scythian steppe culture, the most prominent being the Aorsi, Zeracis, Roxolani, Yazigis, and the Alani. Although the details of the origins of the Alans are obscure, there is some evidence to suggest that they emerged from the confederacy of the Aorsi. That is at least what the Chinese annals imply when they say that the Aorsi were renamed Alani. The likelihood is that the Alani originated as a power group among the Aorsi somewhere on the steppe north of the Caspian Sea, with their rise in power forcing the rest of the Aorsi to migrate across the Don. In 68 AD, the reported presence of Alans near the Sea of Azov led the inhabitants of the Roman-occupied city of Tannius to strengthen their defenses. By this time, they had already established control over much of the Eurasian steppe east of the Dnieper and southwards to the Kuban, from where they mounted a series of raids against the Parthian Empire, most likely along the western coast of the Caspian Sea. In the early 2nd century AD, they raided the territory of the Roman Empire in eastern Asia Minor, this time following the route along the eastern coast of the Black Sea. The Roman historian Cassius Dio reports that King Phrasmanes II of Iberia prompted the Alani to invade the neighboring Roman territories in 135 AD. It was in the territory of Cappadocia that their advance was halted by the legions under the command of Lucius Flavius Arrianus, more commonly known to us today as Arrian. Arrian was also a historian, and documented his defensive tactics in his work Iranica, or Deployment Against the Alani. The 4th century would see cataclysmic events drastically shift the balance of power in the Pontic steppe region. A new steppe tribe from the east, known as the Huns, began their apocalyptic onslaught westwards, completely uprooting and annihilating anything that was in their path. The Alans were amongst the first nomadic groups to get hit with this new terror, against whom they were quickly defeated and forced to flee westwards, just like many other nomadic and sedentary tribes living in Eastern Europe. By 370 AD, although some Alans joined the Hunnic retinue, many other Alani tribal groups sought refuge in the territory of the Eastern Roman Empire along with the Germanic Goths. Although they had initially been granted asylum by the Eastern Emperor Valens, tensions between the tribes and the Romans nevertheless ensued, eventually boiling over into an armed uprising, culminating in the Battle of Adrianople in 378, where the Alans served as a cavalry detachment in the Gothic army commanded by Fritigern. The battle was a decisive victory for the Goths, and Emperor Valens himself was also killed in the fighting. In the aftermath of the battle, the Alans ended up splitting into various groups, each taking a different course. Some were hired to fight for the Romans as allied foederati, others joined as mercenaries for the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, even the Huns. More notably, a portion of the western Alans east of the Rhine River joined the Vandals and the Suebi for their incursions into the Western Roman Empire. Roman historian Gregory of Tours mentions in his Book of Frankish History that a group of Alans led by their king Respendiel aided the Vandals in a battle against the Franks on the day of the crossing of the Rhine on December 31st, 406 AD. Afterwards, the allied barbarians migrated all the way to the Iberian Peninsula, with the Alans settling in the provinces of Lusitania and Carthaginensis. The kingdom of the Alans was among the first barbarian kingdoms to be established in the west. The Sealing Vandals settled in Baetica, the Suebi in coastal Galicia, and the Asding Vandals in the rest of Galicia. Although the barbarian trio controlled Hispania, they were still a tiny minority among a larger Hispano-Roman population, approximately 200,000 out of around 6 million. In 418 AD, Respendiel's successor Ataces was killed in battle against the Visigoths after they invaded Hispania. After this, the Alans offered their crown to the Vandal king Gunderic as a means to form a permanent alliance. Many followed Gunderic's successor Genseric in his invasion of North Africa in 429, after which the kingdom of the Vandals and the Alans had been established. At the time of the crossing of the Rhine, there had in fact been two Alani kings in command of their own respective groups of Alans. While Respendiel commanded a tribe that followed the Vandals and Suebi, another tribe led by a chieftain named Gor had taken a completely different path. Gor had pledged his tribe to the Western Romans and was allowed to settle his people somewhere in Gaul. Wherever the previous location may have been, by 442, the Western Roman Magister Militum of Gaul Flavius Aetius had convinced Gor to resettle his Alans in the Orleannais region in northern Gaul in order to control the Bagadai peasant rebels of Amorica and to keep the Visigoths from expanding their territories northward across the Loire. Gor had agreed to this arrangement, and had also made his own capital in the city of Aurelianum, now modern-day Orléans. Under Gor's successor Sangiban, the Alans of Orléans played a critical role in repelling the invasion of Attila the Hun at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. Following this, the Alans would partake in continuous conflicts in order to help curb the ambitions of their aggressively expansionist neighbors in order to preserve their small kingdom. In 461, former Magister Militum of Gaul Aegidius proclaimed the succession of northern Gaul away from the Western Roman Empire after the assassination of Emperor Majorian by Ricimer. This Gallo-Roman rump state became known as the Kingdom of Soissons. Sensing an opportunity, the Visigoths marched an army against him in order to extend their own territory beyond the Loire River. The Alans, along with the Salian Franks, were allied with Aegidius and marched in his army, and engaged the Visigoths in the Battle of Orléans in 463. The Goths were defeated, and they later defeated a Frankish host led by Hilderic in 466. Around 502 or 503, Frankish king Clovis I attacked Amorica but was defeated by the Alans. Despite this, the Alans, who by this point had converted to Chalcedonian Christianity like Clovis, desired to improve their relations with him in order to counterbalance the hostile Arian Visigoths who coveted the land north of the Loire. Therefore, an accord was arranged by which Clovis came to rule the various peoples of Amorica, and the military strength of the area was integrated into the Merovingian military. It is after this point that the Alans in Gaul vanished from the historical records, as they likely assimilated with the Franks after having successfully negotiated their own integration. Although we have discussed the plight of the Alans that had been a part of the Great Migration period of the 4th and 5th centuries, it is worth noting that the Hunnic invasion had split the Alans into two divisions, the aforementioned European Alans and the Caucasian Alans. Now we will discuss how this group of Alans that had managed to stay in their initial territory continued to last for many centuries after the Hunnic attack. Despite many Alani tribes being pursued westward by the Huns, some tribes chose to stay in their original homeland on either side of the Caspian Sea. They formed what would be known as the Kingdom of Alania. Their name Alania stems from the old Iranian root Aryana, a derivative form of the Indo-Aryan root Arya, meaning Aryan. It is cognate with the name of Iran, which stems from the Old Persian Aryanam, of the Aryans. During the 8th century, they served as a vital buffer state during the wars of the rising Islamic Caliphate against both the Eastern Roman Empire and the westward migrating Khazar Khaganate. The Roman noble Theophanes the Confessor writes in the Chronicle of Theophanes that the Eastern Emperor Justinian II sent his general Leo the Isaurian to bribe the Alani leader into severing his relations with the Kingdom of Abkhazia, who were then allied with the Umayyad Caliph Al-Walid I. After Leo had seized the imperial throne, the Khazars and Alans were attacked by the invading forces of Caliph Umar II. The Umayyad army under General Tabit al-Nahrani was routed, and this led to the Khazar chieftain Baryik erecting several defensive strongholds in Alania, including Skimar, which still stands to this day on top of Mount Kalez in Russia. In addition to their constructed defenses was an important natural barrier in the region of Alania, right on the border between modern-day Russia and Georgia, known as the Daryal Gorge, a name that originates from the Persian term Dari Alan, meaning Gate of the Alans. In 728 AD, the Umayyad prince Marwan ibn Muhammad marched an army through the gates to attempt another incursion into Alanian lands in order to uproot and destroy their fortifications, which ultimately proved successful. Persian traveler and geographer Ibn Rusta visited Alania between 903 and 913 AD and documented what he saw. You go to the left from the kingdom of Sarir, and after 3 days of journey through the mountains and meadows, arrive in the kingdom of Al-Lan. Their king is Christian at heart, but all his people are idolaters. Then you travel for 10 days among rivers and woods before arriving at a fortress called the Gate of the Alans. It stands on top of a mountain at the foot of which there is a road. High mountains surround it, and 1,000 men from among its inhabitants guard its walls day and night. In the late 9th century, Alania had become independent from the Khazar Khaganate, and in the early 10th century had fallen under the influence of the Eastern Roman Empire due to the conversion of the Alans to Christianity after King Constantine III of Abkhazia sent an army and the Roman Patriarch Nicholas Mystikos to forcibly convert the populace. While some of the Alan elite families converted, much of the rural population continued to follow their ancestral pagan traditions. The Alani kings frequently allied with the Byzantines and various Georgian kings for protection against the encroachments by the constant onslaught of rising northern steppe peoples, such as the Pechenegs and Kipchaks during this period. Intermarriage amongst the Alani, Georgian, and Byzantine nobility was common. One noteworthy example of this is when Emperor Michael VII Dukas, who is famous for deposing Emperor Romanos IV after the disastrous Battle of Manzikert in 1071 AD against the rising Seljuk Turks, married Maria of Alania, who was the daughter of the Georgian king Bagrat IV. A further alliance was cemented when Alani Prince David Soslan married the famous Queen Tamar of Georgia, who was also half Alanian herself. Many Alans also served as mercenaries for the Georgian kings against their Muslim Seljuk neighbors. By the late 1230s, a new steppe terror emerged from the east, known as the Mongols. Since their rise to power under the leadership of Chinggis Khan, they had been on a relentlessly destructive path of conquest through the territories of powerful kingdoms and emirates in the regions of Central Asia, Persia, and Russia. The kingdom of Alania, along with nearby Georgia and Vladimir Suzdal, were unable to stand against this new threat, and fell under the subjugation of the Great Khan after suffering severe losses to their population. The final blow to the Alani kingdom came in the 14th century when the Turco-Mongol warlord Timur the Lame attacked the Caucasus, scattering the population for a final time. Despite Timur's onslaught, many Alans survived due to seeking further refuge in remote hideaways within their mountainous homeland. These Alans broke into 3 groups. 2 formed the 2 principal Ossetian groups, Digor and Iron. Another group migrated west along with their fellow nomadic Kipchaks into Eastern Europe and formed a new identity known as the Yasyk people while still retaining their Iranian ethnic identity and culture. The Yasyk people eventually settled into the territory of modern-day Hungary. Another group of Alans assimilated into the Mongol horde. Other Alani refugees began migrating south to the bordering Georgian kingdom of Kartli. These migrations steadily increased during the Caucasus Viceroyalty period established by the Russian Empire between 1801 until the Romanovs' violent deposition in 1917. With the subsequent rise of the Bolsheviks under the Soviet Union, the Alani within their established state of South Ossetia joined them in their conflict against the Georgians under the Menshevik Democratic Republic of Georgia. The Alanis received the name of Ossetians from the Russians, who had adopted the Georgian denomination of Ossi and Osseti, which had been used to label the Alans since the early medieval era. The Soviets secured complete control of the Caucasus region by 1922, but South Ossetia was allowed to remain as an autonomous oblast. In the present era, the Ossetians are the people with the closest genetic ties to the ancient Alans, whose population in the Caucasus region between the borders of Russia and Georgia number just over 500,000. Their main lingua franca is the Ossetic language, a remnant of the Scytho-Sarmatian dialect group and one of the last remaining Iranian languages within Europe. The legacy of the Western European Alans can still be witnessed in the Iberian Peninsula today. After settling in the region, the Alans became known for their massive hunting dogs, known as the Alount. which they apparently introduced to Europe. The breed is extinct, but its name is carried by a Spanish breed of dog still called Alano, traditionally used in boar hunting and cattle herding, although the Alano name has historically been used for a number of dog breeds in a few European countries thought to descend from the original dog of the Alans, such as the German Mastiff called the Great Dane and the French Dogue de Bordeaux, among others. In Portugal exists a small municipality in the Lisbon district named Alenquer, a name which likely derived from the Germanic phrase Alankirk, meaning Temple of the Alans. The Alant dog is still represented in that city's coat of arms. Whether it was their remarkable journey across Western Europe or their enduring plight to maintain cohesion in their original Caucasus homeland, amidst the relentless onslaught of invaders from all sides, the story of the Alani people is one of astounding endurance and determination that cannot be ignored in the story of the rise and fall of the peoples of the steppe.